Welcome to the Sensational Sex Podcast, where we help women in long-term relationships thrive after the honeymoon stage is over. Are you a woman who wants a deep, intimate, and satisfying connection with her partner? Of course you do. Amy Rowan and Dr. Trina Reed have the answers, and all you have to do is join us each week. Soon, you'll be that woman who effortlessly has a satisfying sex life. Now, let's start the show. What is the Sensational Sex Podcast, and why do you need to listen?
Join us as we discuss how we became sexologists and why we started the Sensational Sex Podcast.
I am Dr. Trina Reed.
And I'm Amy Rowan, the suburban sexologist.
In this episode, you'll find out what was the best sex advice anyone ever gave to us.
You'll also find out what was the worst sex advice we ever received.
And what we want you to learn by listening every week to the Sensational Sex Podcast.
And now a word from our sponsor. We are thrilled to partner with Extends, who are all about making your sensual experience the best it can be.
Extends has an amazing Fall in Love giveaway valued at over $700, and we'll tell you more about that halfway through our podcast.
Wow, Extends really is a wonderful brand.
We love what Extends is doing for your sensual and sexual experience.
Hello, beautiful people. I'm Dr. Trina Reed, and thank you for listening to the Sensational Sex Podcast. And we're so happy you're joining us.
Even though your sex life will never be perfect, you can create a sex life that is perfect for you. And we are here to help you with that.
But Amy, happy Sexual Awareness Month. Did you know?
Hey.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Woo! Did you know in 2010, the World Association for Sexual Health deemed September 4th the World Sexual Health Day in an effort to promote a greater social awareness on sexual health across the globe. And this year's World Sexual Health Day is, drumroll please, love, thank you, love, bonding, and intimacy. How perfect is that for our podcast?
It's completely perfect. This is exactly why we're launching this month. Love, bonding, and intimacy. I mean, that's really our purpose in life and what we like to do. So
that's our jam. That's completely our jam.
Absolutely. What, we both share such a passion about is that knowledge is power, and we want issues of sexual health to be discussed everywhere. So what a perfect month to launch this podcast. Sexual health, it encompasses mind, body, spirit, and everyone should be knowledgeable about sexual health and education. And so listening to our podcast, we are here to give you accurate, research-based sex education. And we're going to tell you a little bit later how you can send in your questions and anything that you're curious about at the end of our podcast.
Nothing shocks us. We've heard it all. So if you have questions, anything you're curious about, we've seen it all. So send it in to us. We love to get those emails. Amy, as this is our first podcast, it's important for people to get to know us. So we're going to start things off by asking each other 5 revealing questions. I suppose if we want other people to get vulnerable, we have to get vulnerable ourselves. I mean, is that how it works here? I guess.
Yes, 100%. I think
so. Yeah, so I'm going to,
right?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I'll start with you, Amy.
Sure.
Tell us about yourself. Who is Amy Rowan? And why did you become a sex educator?
Well, thank you for asking that question.
You're welcome.
So, who is Amy Rowan? Before we go into myself as a sex educator, I am a wife. I am a mom. I've been married for 20 years this year. I'm a mom of 3 boys. I've got one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high school.
So you're still in the trenches. Is that what you're saying? You're still in the trenches.
Definitely still in the trenches. Not quite the trenches of small ones, but I've been through that. So I definitely know how that feels. But definitely I'm in the taxi driver stage where I just drive children everywhere. So I spend a lot of time in the car. I literally drive a red minivan around the suburbs of Atlanta. So I live in the southeastern of the United States. I'm in a wonderful marriage with my husband, James. He is my everything. We just celebrated his birthday yesterday.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And he's just been phenomenal through so many things. I'm a breast cancer survivor, so I'm actually coming up and celebrating 7 years cancer-free. That's been a big part of my journey. And I'm not driving children places or trying to be a good, wife and mom. Try to do some good things for myself too. I love playing tennis. I'm not great at it, but I get better every day, which is kind of fun in your 40s. And I just love spending time with my family and my friends and reading when I can. And that's a little bit about me as a person. As a sexual health educator, I really feel like I was born to do this work. My dad is a retired OBGYN and my mom is a practicing psychotherapist.
Wow.
And as
smart parents, you must be a smart person.
Well, thank you. There's always lots to learn, but this has just been a subject that has interested me from a very early age. Back to middle school, my friends would come and ask me questions to ask my dad. This is back in the 90s, right? So there was no internet to go look things up on. And so they would say, hey, Amy, can you ask your dad this or that? And it was questions that maybe they weren't comfortable asking their parents, or they weren't comfortable asking their doctor. So I started to learn a lot about sort of the female reproductive system early on. And then after I became a stay-at-home mom, I started doing intimacy toy parties. They were so much fun and I loved them. But I would have women that would come up to me at the end of each of these parties and say, hey, Amy, I've never had an orgasm before. Or, hey, Amy, my husband and I haven't had sex in a year. Can you help? And I knew that selling a toy was a Band-Aid, maybe at best. And there really was a lot deeper work to be done there. And that's what inspired me to go back to school and become a board certified clinical sexologist. And I just love teaching. I love helping. I want people to have more pleasure and fun in their lives and strengthen their relationships and just feel good, because you know what? Like, in my opinion, there's nothing better. Great way to start your day, end your day, feels good for yourself. Great way to stay bonded with your partner, and just helping people release so many of the things that are holding us back. And that's why we're here. So let me ask you the same question. Tell us about yourself, and why did you become a sex educator?
I am from Canada. I have been married for 22 years. I married a very, very smart man, and we had very smart children. I didn't understand when you have very smart children, they need extra time and attention. It was in my best interest to spend more time with my children, making sure that they were going to be okay. I took a step back. I've been a part-time sexologist and a full-time mom for many years. And in that time, you know how you hear sometimes when people are upset, they go and start cleaning their house. Mm-hmm. I know that I'm really upset because I start chopping carrots. I'm like chopping, like I'm thinking. So like food really helps soothe me. I love to eat and I love to cook. And I love a grueling workout. I'm one of those people who go to the gym, and I'm sorry, like I'm Canadian, so I have to apologize for everything. I really love to eat healthy and I love to work out. That's my jam. And why did I become a sexologist? I have 2 undergraduate degrees, one's in business, and I just assumed I would be a career person. And I did spend 10 years in corporate Canada, but I always was interested in sex, but there was never a legit way to make money or a legit career, especially back then. And I did try sex toy parties, but it was like the whole distribution thing didn't work for me. My curiosity was still there. One day I was single. I was walking with this really hot guy. We were doing a dog walk, and he's like a pretty no-nonsense guy. And after talking with each other about sex, he turned to me and he said, you really should be teaching this stuff. And that like thing that just opens up in your head. It's like, you're right. I should be teaching this stuff, but I don't know how that would work. Yeah. And just like that, everything opened up. Got accepted into this school that I was not qualified for. And I got this dream job of training, which I could do while I was working on my graduate degree. I had no business getting this training job. Like I was not a trainer at the time. Right? Everything just fell into place. And I've been doing this for 25 years. And I can say that there's been a lot of ups and downs. And there was a point where I decided to walk away. I was pretty disillusioned by a lot of things. And this lady emailed me she's from Calgary, and she was like, I have this big group of women and I hear you're a really good speaker and we'd love to have you. And I was like, sorry, I'm just not interested. I'm moved on from that. She said, please, these women really want you to come. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. There was 250
these women just were completely losing their minds. We had so much fun, and I was reminded why I'm doing this and why it's important. I got back from that and I just started writing books and I started creating courses, and here we are, you and me, doing this podcast now.
Yes. And this is where you're needed and this is where your expertise is. I love how the world called you back into that. And so here we are.
Question 2, Amy, is what is this podcast for you? And why are you doing this?
The Sensational Sex Podcast is, to me, it's an opportunity for us to be able to reach and help as many women and couples that are seeking help. There are a lot of different sex podcasts out there. You and I have explored a lot of them, and I had found many long before you and I started talking. What I think is unique about ours is not only are we just talking about sex, but we are really wanting to give our listeners a roadmap to experiencing better sex. When you reached out to me after we connected on my summit and you said, Amy, I want to do something with you, I was so excited because
I'm really smart. Did I mention that? I'm smart. So I brought Amy in and I'm like, come on, Amy, we're going to do this together.
Yes. Well, and I was so inspired by you because you have had a very, very long, illustrious career as a sexologist, and you've gone through some ups and downs. That is something that I think so many women relate to. Yeah, lots of women have big dreams, and sometimes the dreams don't work out or look the way that we thought that they were going to. Just seeing and learning more about you and then the work that we did together when you said, let's do this podcast together. I've been thinking about doing a podcast, but the thought of doing all of it is a lot. A podcast, I think, is a lot more work than most people realize. I was just really excited and inspired to do this with you because I think we have a very similar view, a very similar teaching style, but we also come at things from a slightly different perspective. And so I'm just excited to be able to teach and help as many women, couples, and really whoever just wants to tune in and listen to us. So what about you? Why are you doing this?
I built a program. This program took me 20 years to noodle out, like thinking about, women in long-term relationships, how can they thrive after the honeymoon stage is over? The reason I'm doing this podcast is I want every woman to have free information, to get this information for free. You can buy it, or you can listen to this podcast. So every week we're going to be going through small steps of this program that I built. I like this. I like small steps because you can listen to the podcast, you can implement the small step, and then we'll move on to the next step. And, pretty soon you're going to be that woman who's having the sex that she wants to have. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, Amy, because I want every woman to be able to access this information, regardless of where they are at in their life.
I read your book. I read your workbook. There's so much great information in there. And I love that the beginning of this podcast is taking that and putting into bite-sized pieces. And I think everyone should be able to have access to research-based, evidence-based information, because the reality is where most people are learning about sex these days is porn. People have different opinions on porn. I'm sure we'll cover that in a later episode. But there's so much misinformation and stuff that comes through there. And so I love being able to help as many people as possible, again, for free, and giving you guys really good, high quality information, through the eyes of two sexologists.
Oh. Question 3. What is the best sex advice anyone ever gave you?
I had to noodle on this one for a little bit because there's a difference between the advice that I've been given and then the things that we've learned throughout our training, or at least throughout my training. I decided to go back to long before I was a sexologist, back just when I was just a young woman learning about sex in one of my first good sexual relationships. And there were some not so great ones before that. But
that's how you learn.
That is, absolutely. And
you gotta learn what you don't like, and you have to learn what you like. So these are two good learnings.
Yes, absolutely. One of the best pieces of advice that I got as a young woman was make some noise. As a young woman in my first good sexual relationship, I didn't know my body very well. I didn't really know how I experienced pleasure very well. I was kind of counting on this guy to know his way around my body. And I was just kind of very quiet, just kind of waiting for something to happen. I'm sure that had to have been really fun for him too. Wasn't super fun for me either. And it took me a little while. And finally someone said, Amy, if things feel good, make a little, and we're not talking like porn star screaming here, but just make like a sigh, a moan. Just let them know when they're headed in the right direction. Positive encouragement. And then when they know that, if you're giving them some positive encouragement, then they're going to know to keep doing that or come back to that. It was such a small little thing, but I started doing that. I started making a little bit of noise when things felt good. And lo and behold, guess what? It created a positive feedback loop, which I know is something we're going to be talking about too. And that started to leading to more and more pleasurable sexual experiences. So
Nice.
it was just a little thing, but
the thing is, it's little, but it made a big impact, right?
Mhm.
It's important to share ideas that you can do right now. There's no awkwardness in that piece of advice you just gave. You can just try it out and see how it works. And if it works, then do it some more. It's great advice.
Yeah. What about you? What's the best sex advice anyone ever gave you?
I've had a lot of good advice, but actually the best advice I got was not from a sex book. It was from a financial book. I was listening to this financial audiobook, and Denise Duffel Thomas said, most financial gurus do the how-to, but I don't do how-to. I do mindset. On that day, it just clicked that men prefer the how-tos. And there's nothing wrong with that. But men prefer how to give a hand job, how to find the G-spot, how to kiss better, like how to do this. I have been trying to teach women how to have sex, when in fact, many women are more geared towards the mindset, which is the relationship you have towards sexuality and how that affects your will, want, and desire in the bedroom. So that was like a pivotal moment in my career. I got this epiphany of women don't want how-tos, women want mindset. And it was like, okay, this is what women need to learn.
Yeah. I think you're right on the ball there, because, and I'm in a very task-oriented, generally speaking, we're going to be talking in some generalities here, but that how-to is, it kind of just give me the steps, 1, 2, 3.
And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with how people prefer to learn how to do things, right? It's just different. And I think, women need to respect that it's okay for them to want to learn their sexuality this way, and how their mindset is, fundamentally affecting everything about your sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah. And people have a much greater awareness of how mindset affects how we view lots of different things, but, certainly, especially sex. And I love that we're going to be talking a lot about that, and helping women learn how to get into that right mindset. So before we continue with these next questions, you want to do some sex IQ, test your sex IQ?
Every episode, we're going to be testing your IQ. If you find this interesting or not interesting, email us and let us know.
Yeah, sure. So of course we find sex facts to be interesting.
So we'll be right back. Amy, I love me a giveaway. Me too, especially when it involves things that bring me sensuality and loving touch. We are thrilled to be partnered with Xsense, who is doing the most amazing Fall in Love giveaway. Don't miss out on the chance to win one of 4 luxurious bundles featuring a best-selling Iroha toy and great Xsense products. Each bundle is worth over $175. Indulge in a Japanese and French love affair that will leave you swooning. Enter now for an experience that you'll fall in love with. It's super easy to enter. Simply go to xsense-usa.com to enter. Amy, can you imagine this amazing gift basket showing up on your doorstep? Oh, I can. And how fun will it be for you and your partner to open it together? And all the fun things that will happen after. You have until September 27th, 2024 to enter. So go right this second before you get distracted. And share the love and make sure to tell all your friends. Make your fall a lot more interesting with the Extends Fall in Love giveaway. Good luck. Amy and I were keeping our fingers and our toes crossed that you get to win the Fall in Love bundle.
We're going to be sharing some of these different facts because we think they're super fascinating.
True or false?
True or false? The clitoris has twice as many nerve endings as the penis. True or false?
So the answer, Amy, is true, but there's a penis twist.
Okay.
Which we'll get into. But the penis contains 4,000 nerve endings, and most of those nerve endings are in the head, the glands. So there's very little nerve endings in the shaft. So the human clitoris is a scientific iceberg, both physically and figuratively. So if you don't know, there's the outer clitoris, which is Amy's got a diagram. So there's the little nub that sticks out, but then there's the internal legs that are on the inside. So this is why they say it's a scientific iceberg, because you don't see most of the clitoris. So there is an average of 5,140 dorsal clitoral nerve fibers that were counted. And Amy, I just want to know the scientists that counted multiple clitorises.
Yes.
To get an average of 5,140 nerve endings. The dorsal nerve is symmetrical. So this average was multiplied by 2, arriving at the estimate of 10,281 nerve fibers found in the human clitoris dorsal nerve.
So that's over double what is found in the head of the penis.
However,
but the penis twist to this is that circumcision removes the most important sensory component of the foreskin. And there are thousands of coiled fine touch receptors called Meissner's corpuscles. And also lost during circumcision are branches of the dorsal nerve. And in that, there's 10,000 to 20,000 specialized erotogenic nerve endings of several types. What do you think about that?
I just remember very early on in my career, I was doing a sex show in Detroit, and there was a protester there, and he was protesting circumcision. I'm not making a judgment, but I do understand why this person was so upset, because we're finding out now what the foreskin does for the penis.
Interesting, and there's a lot more information coming out, like there is all the time. So the thing that we want you guys to take from this particular sex IQ fact is that the clitoris, what you think is that tiny little nub, is really this whole network of nerve endings that has more than double the nerve endings that are found in the head of the penis. So
yeah.
Super interesting.
Yes. Yay for us.
Yay for us. So, and the other thing that I always like to share about the clitoris is the sole purpose of the clitoris, the reason it exists, is to give us pleasure. That's the only reason we have it, which I think is pretty awesome.
It is awesome. We're going to move back to the questions. So question number 4, Amy.
Okay.
What is the worst sex advice anyone ever gave you?
Fake it to get it over with.
Oh, did somebody actually say that to you?
If you aren't feeling, just fake it to get it over with. And I know we're going to dive into this too, but this is about the worst sex advice you can get, period, because and there's so many reasons why people fake and things like that. If you're faking to get it over with, first of all, you're teaching that partner that whatever it is that they're doing is good. That feels good to you. And that's giving them bad information. And whether you stay in that relationship or that relationship breaks up and you move on, that person is like, oh yeah, my partner was having lots of orgasms and you weren't. They're taking those faulty skills, moving on with them. You're cheating yourself out of all kinds of fun that you could be having. Yeah. It is okay if you don't have an orgasm every time you are experiencing, pleasure or having some playtime with a partner. It's good to be having an orgasm at least some of the time, the majority of the time. But if you aren't feeling it, then rather than feeling like you're broken or trying to protect somebody's ego, looking into that and saying, okay, this isn't working for me. Why not? Okay, I'm not having enough arousal? And if, there's so many different things. I want to start on episode 1 of this podcast. Don't fake it.
Don't fake your orgasm.
Yes. So, and we'll be talking more about why and how and
know
what to
why
do
you do it.
instead.
Okay.
So,
I'm preaching to the choir. Thank you. That was very good.
What about you? What's the worst sex advice you ever received?
I'm going to tell on myself. When I was going to graduate school, this was 20 plus years ago, they still didn't know a lot about women's anatomy, and we're still learning, right? But still quite a big black hole. And one of the things that I learned in graduate school was that every woman could have a G-spot orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I got out of graduate school and I started speaking to crowds of people, I told thousands of people that everybody could have a G-spot orgasm. You just have to try harder. You just have to do it the right way. I feel terrible now that we know that not every woman wants or can have a G-spot orgasm. It was what we knew at the time. I'm sorry to all those people who made feel like they could do it, but then they couldn't do it, and then they felt bad about themselves. Like, gosh.
Well, and I think what that speaks to, though, is until very, very recently, almost all of the studies about human sexuality have really been done on male bodies and how male bodies work. And the expectation is that women's sexuality is just kind of like a lesser, not so great version of male sexuality, when really they're just two very different things. They operate in different ways, and you need a different understanding of that. And sharing how we know more because we have, better imaging. We've got, all sorts of, more studies and things that are coming out, and more research is needed too. I mean, we are still, just like the clitoris, we're still just on the tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned.
Question number 5, Amy, is what do you want women to learn by listening to the Sensational Sex podcast?
I want women to learn and know that they are not broken. That however you experience pleasure, however you need or want or like to be touched or touch, that all of that is natural. And I'm not going to say the word normal. And that we are capable of experiencing pleasure and having positive sexual interactions as long as we choose to. And I'm talking 60s, 70s, 80s. It may look different than it looked in our 20s and 30s, but wonderful, pleasurable sex is absolutely possible and there for you. Our goal with this podcast is to give you those small little steps every single episode to help you gain a greater understanding of yourself, a greater understanding of your body, and a greater understanding, of your partner and your relationship if you're in one, so that you can step into whatever pleasure you
And the thing is that when you build a mutual pleasure, you're building your relationship, and your relationship is flourishing, but also becoming a lot more solid. You can make it through the good times and the bad times. And even if you're experiencing a bad time, like somebody's sick or somebody lost their job, or, things are happening in your life, you can still have a good sex life, even though there's things happening in your life that most likely would push sex to the side. When you start creating this sex life that you want, suddenly those barriers aren't barriers anymore. You still want to have sex despite whatever's going on in your life. I know a lot of women who kind of roll their eyes at that. They're like, it's easy for you to say because you're a sexologist, but I'm just a regular woman in a long-term marriage with 2 teenage boys, and I understand everything that women are going through. I get it. What we're creating with this podcast is going to help you make that happen.
To your point, same thing, also regular women, long-term marriage, 3 kids, like things are busy. Our life is busy all the time. In our relationship, I have experienced that when we're connecting really well sexually, the hard things, which pop up, big major things come up in life, and that's always going to happen. But when you are feeling nurtured and cared for and connecting in that deep, deep, vulnerable way in the bedroom, all of those things become easier. And often you'll find that in those hardest moments, you're going to turn towards each other and use sex. It can be a soothing, connecting mechanism versus turning away and it becoming something that is another like, oh gosh, no, like I have too many things going on. Like, in my opinion, when you're stressed, that's the best time to have sex because goodness gracious,
so
what a great sex relief.
Being like, you want a piece of me too. It's like, you're feeling me up.
Yes.
Maybe taken the wrong way, but
we can do some crazy, silly puns here during this, right? It's a sex podcast. Sure. Well, what about you? What do you want women to learn listening to our podcast?
Oh, I'm very clear. I'm very clear about what I want women to learn. I want them to understand that what they want from sex is probably very different than what their partner wants, and that's okay. To understand what they want and then ask for what they want. And once they ask for what they want, receive the pleasure that they asked for. So these are 3 milestones. A lot of women seem insurmountable. They're not insurmountable. We're going to walk you through this, how to make this happen. Hopefully by the end of this series, you're going to be like, yes, I know what I want, which is different from my partner. And I'm also taking my partner's needs into account. But here's the things that I need from this sex in order to make it good for me. I'm going to ask for that sex. And then I'm going to lean back and receive this pleasure. You know, when you hit that stage, it's just magical. Mm-hmm. It's like you say, when you're stressed out, you're turning towards sex instead of turning away from sex.
You know, and one thing that I love so much about your book and your workbook, and do not ask me to plug this, but it
go ahead,
appropriate. But go ahead. It's 5 simple steps, and when you dive into each one of them and you look into all of them, then it leads you into that place, and it really can be broken down into those 5 steps. That's what we're going to walk you through. Right here on this podcast, and that and so much more. So I'm so excited to start this with you.
Yeah, speaking of which, let's talk about next week's podcast, because we'll be discussing the big question: why do you have sex? Is it for you or is it for your partner?
I hear so often, I want to have sex, but I really don't want to. But I know like my partner wants it, so I'm doing it for him, and I'm just taking one for the team. I mean, and taking from one for the team doesn't sound very fun. So
fun. Everybody takes one for the team once in a while, but it shouldn't be your go-to. Yeah. Quickies and just getting it over with and faking, and should not be your go-to.
Yeah, not the go-to. So yes, there's different reasons, but I love that. Why do you have sex? So we're going to dive into that, why you have sex, what those reasons are. And just looking forward, we have planned 58 episodes of the Sensational Sex Podcast. We've mapped out a journey for you that we're really excited to bring you on along with us. We also want to answer your questions. We want to know what you want to learn about. So if you've got some questions that you want for us to answer, you can email them to us at sensationalsexpodcast@gmail.com.
All right, Amy, I think we're done our first episode. Congratulations to us. Yeah, until next time, take care.
Take care.
On next week's episode of the Sensational Sex Podcast.
Why do you have sex?
Do you have sex because it makes you feel good and you want to, or do you have sex because you feel like you have to?
In this episode of the Sensational Sex Podcast, you'll find out how women find themselves in the broken orgasm as the goal sex rut.
You'll also find out what is your delayed sexual response and how by using your responsive desire, it will move you into your sexual arousal.
We'll also cover why women never ask for something that she wants during sex because she, 1, doesn't know how, 2, doesn't feel like she deserves it, and 3, feels like it's too much work.
Are you ready to experience more passion and more pleasure? In my suburban intimacy practice, I offer one-on-one sex and intimacy coaching for women and couples. Book a complimentary discovery call at suburbanintimacy.com or learn more about my Intimacy Ignite program, your solution to experiencing satisfying and fulfilling sexual experiences and connection, even when you're busy, tired, and stressed. Intimacy Ignite is a curated collection of stimulating sex education, activities, and challenges, whether you are single or in a relationship, plus live coaching with me twice a month. Save $10 off your first month with the code podcast. You can learn more at intimacyignite.org.
Is more fulfilling sex on your mind, but not in your bedroom?
Then go to trinareid.com to get your free copy of the Sex Bootcamp Masterclass. While you're there, check out my award-winning fiction book, The Sex Course, that went to #1 in its Amazon category 3 days after launch. Both the Sex Course and Sex Bootcamp Workbook are available in audiobook. If you want to hang with groovy, like-minded, sex-positive women, then join my online courses and the Success Community. It's your time to create the sex life of your dreams. It all starts at trinareid.com.
Did you love what you learned today? Share this episode with someone who needs it. Friends don't let friends have bad sex. Leave a review for this episode and follow, like, or subscribe on the listening app of your choice. We love hearing from our listeners. Email us at sensationalsexpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on all social media platforms at sensationalsxpodcast. And join our mailing list at sensationalsexpodcast.com.